Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at another MacBook this year, and this specific one is probably one of the most controversial MacBooks Apple has ever made, and it took them years and years to basically reverse the problems that they added within this specific device. So this specific MacBook are the 2016 MacBooks that they made. So they made a couple. They made like a MacBook Retina, like the 12-inch one. We're not talking about those in this specific video. We're talking about the 13-inch one and the 15-inch one that they ended up making. Now, if you want to pick up some MacBooks I would recommend buying, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, the first thing to keep in mind is before these specific MacBooks, the 2015 models, I actually ended up owning one and I had a great time with it. With the 2016 models though, they made a massive design change. So for one, it's still the clamshell MacBook. They didn't do anything crazy with it, but they pretty much went ahead and removed almost all of the ports within that MacBook. That was the biggest problem that we were having, in my opinion, was that they went ahead and only gave us USB Type-C ports. They still maintained the headphone jack, which was great, but they removed the HDMI port, the standard MagSafe port. They removed the SD card slot. They removed the other ports, USB Type-A ports. Like, they didn't give us anything on the next one, just USB-C. Now, since then, they have reverted a lot of those things, and there's also a lot of benefit of having USB-C, if I'm being honest. But I think there was just no gradual way of, for them to kind of move from the 2015 one to a 2016 one with way more ports and way less ports. I feel like there's like 50 billion ways of making it a better, smoother change than what they actually did. So looking back in hindsight, hindsight's 2020, I do think, Apple's learned their lesson. I hope they don't do something like this again. But that pretty much brings us with the 2016 MacBook. So on the outside, I think it still looks great. I think visually these MacBooks looked amazing, and that these are probably some of the best looking MacBooks Apple has ever made. I've always liked those 12-inch MacBooks as well, but these ones just look just amazing, and I love these MacBooks for sure. So you have the standard Apple logo up top, but then, on the sides, we have our USB Type-C ports. So depending on which model you have, you can get either 2 USB-C ports or you can get up to 4. Now, one thing that I actually did like a lot by having, multiple USB-C ports, especially that 4 model, was that we were getting a USB-C port on each side. So that was something I really did like. So if you were getting those more expensive, the 15-inch one had 4 USB-C ports, well, you could go ahead and charge your MacBook out from the left side or to the right side. And that was something I really did like from this device. It wasn't the reason why I would go and upgrade to this MacBook, but I really did like having that because coming from my 2015 MacBook, to be honest, having it, charged from the, just the standard MagSafe charging port on the left side can be kind of annoying, especially if you're trying to switch sides every once in a while and whatnot. Like, it was nice having that type of capability there, which is honestly very cool. Now, on the bottom of these MacBooks, there's really not much else. We just have our standard aluminum back, so you can take the screws out, and these MacBooks, you could actually still change out a few things within them. The 2015 MacBook allowed you to do a lot more. The 2012 MacBook, you can replace the whole entire MacBook if you wanted to. With this type of Mac, I think you could still do a few things, but I don't really think many people are touching this MacBook anymore, so there's not even a big point even mentioning it. Now, opening this MacBook up, there were even more improvements, and this is still one of the funnier things Apple's ever done. So for one, they did kind of, I think, shrink the packaging of this whole entire model a little bit smaller. So basically, these were in smaller footprints than the previous generation. I think they were thinner, and I do think they were smaller in general, even the 15-inch one, and I think that was a pretty cool thing. I like having a smaller MacBook. I think that did affect battery life a little bit. Even the 13-inch models, though, we're getting these new speaker grills on the left and right side of the keyboard. So that was a really cool thing. Before, that was only saved for the 15-inch models, but now we were having that on the 13-inch models as well. The displays looked very good. I don't think it was a big upgrade coming from the previous generation, but it was still a very good looking display as well. But then that gives us to our touch bar. So this was, I think we all know, it was like a little screen at the bottom. It replaced the function keys. And I pretty much have no idea what Apple was trying to do here. They were trying to make this, I think they were trying to make it look way different than all the other PCs in the market. And I thought to myself, there's a reason people didn't put like a little mini display on the top. And I've used a bunch of MacBooks that had function keys. My M1 MacBook Pro I used for about a year that also had function key, or that had the touch bar. And, to be honest, it really wasn't that bad. But I had to remind myself that touch bar on my M1 MacBook Pro was a more refined version with a really good chipset inside, and even I still had some issues. Imagine what the new hardware and software layout was for people who owned this MacBook back in 2016. I'm sure it was not as clean or as good as it is now, and since then Apple has learned their lesson, and we have not gotten a touch bar on our MacBooks, at least on our standard MacBooks, the more expensive ones, in a while. The M1 MacBook Pro still has it, but it's only a matter of time before Apple removes that one too. And I mean, that was a big loss Apple took there, if I'm being honest. Now, looking and zooming out of this MacBook, I think Apple, was trying to do the right thing, but I think they kind of dropped the ball, and because of that, this MacBook really isn't worth buying for a few different reasons. But we haven't even gotten to the biggest thing that Apple really dropped the ball with these MacBooks for many, many years. And that was the butterfly keyboard. So what Apple ended up doing with their specific MacBooks was that they went ahead and basically, again, I don't know why they did this, but they basically removed a bunch of travel from these MacBook keys. So they wanted to make it so you can't really click in all the way, I guess. And I guess this made it so, one, is probably cheaper to make, but two, you could have a thinner profile. And I think, again, their approach was okay. But what they ended up doing was that they ended up having these issues where some of the keys and mechanisms would break, and sometimes dust would get in between the keys and it would mess up the keyboards and whatnot. And that was a massive problem that Apple had. They ended up doing recall programs, repair services. I think they got sued by a lot of people and they ended up paying a lot of money for it. This was probably one of the biggest things that Apple has ever done that probably led to one of the biggest downfalls of their Macs. And there was such a stagnation of people buying these specific MacBooks. Like, people wanted to upgrade their Macs. Even myself, I mean, I would love to go in 2015, I had my 2015 MacBook in 2018 and 2019, and I was trying to find the best MacBook to go and upgrade to, and I even bought a couple MacBooks, I reviewed them. I bought the 16-inch MacBook in 2020, but I just couldn't find one that kind of fit well for me because of the keyboard and the keys. But then what ended up happening was Apple made the M1 MacBooks, and then I ended up making it a little bit better. But even for someone like me, I don't mind, if my MacBook's messed up or even the keyboard, breaks, because I can get a good deal off it, and maybe I can repair it myself. But for a lot of people out there, they're not trying to do that. And with this type of MacBook, for many, many years, I mean, from 2016, probably up until like early 2020, those MacBooks are just kind of worthless because the keyboards can fail out at any moment. So that was one of the biggest issues we had with this Mac. And when I look back, that's kind of a sad thing, to be honest, because the hardware is still very good, meaning on the outside. And the performance of these MacBooks aren't even that bad. Like, of course, they're not great, but you can easily still use this thing on an everyday basis if you really wanted to. Now, these Macs aren't really supported with software anymore, and that's kind of where the biggest thing kind of lays at. It's not really worth buying anymore because you aren't really getting this thing supported with software. But when I look at this MacBook, I still kind of think to myself, like, wow, this thing visually looks like one of the best Macs Apple has ever made. But actually using this thing, there's just no point in doing that because this thing is kind of, it's just kind of like a walking missile. It could go off at any moment and then you can't even use this thing anymore. So at the end of the day, I don't really think this MacBook is worth buying. But luckily for you, Apple has done a tremendous job with their current lineup. You have a plethora of really good quality MacBooks that you can buy, and I think they've made up for it quite a bit, So if you're in the market, instead of buying this 2016 MacBook Pro, if you still use it and you're still okay with it, then by all means go for it. But for the majority of people out there, what I would recommend doing is buying a MacBook that is still supported with software and that is probably past the 2020 timeframe. So things like the M1 MacBook Air, very, very good deal. It does not get that much better than that, to be honest. You have the M1 MacBook Pro that I still own. I still own both those Macs and I have a great time with them. You can get the M2 MacBook Air. It's a little bit more expensive. You can even get an M1 Mac Mini if you don't even want to have a portable machine, and you can save a lot of money that way too. But all in all, I don't think the 2016 MacBook Pro is worth buying anymore. I think it had its time, but I think the time is pretty much gone now. So that pretty much covers it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.